Hello. Hello, this is the My Artifact episode number 3735. Today's date is December 1st, 2025. It's been almost like a morning at 8:58 a.m. Alright, let's just jump into the question. Alright, the question is, what if wealth was redistributed through creativity? Okay, that's a good. Alright, first of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question to myself? This is what if question. Why am I asking this question to myself? What if question is always really interested way to give the answer. It kind of like a force you to think about that reality. And when I try to think about that reality or when I try to create that reality, I'm kind of like utilizing my information and knowledge and experience to kind of like simply telling this or kind of like creating this reality. Okay, yeah. It's not a kind of like a typical question where what is actually 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, because answer in this particular question is a stagnant. Like you went to the every part of the universe, your answer would be a 4. It's not kind of like a simply 2 plus 2 you will gonna say 7. No, you will definitely gonna say 4. But it's a kind of like a simple question where what is actually 2 plus 3 is not 7. So when you ask this question, what is 2 plus 3 is not 7, means you just try to understand what is actually meaning of 2, what is actually meaning of 3, what is actually meaning of 7, what is actually meaning of plus and things like that. Because you are kind of like asking question to the question, and it kind of like somehow you get more and more knowledge instead of kind of like simply getting the number. Just you just, I don't know, it's somehow good. I don't know how do I supposed to explain this thing, but it felt good. Disclaimer: the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right or is not exactly wrong either. It's raw, it's unfiltered, it's just my opinion. So do not believe in any kind of like information that I'm saying, or do not seek for any kind of like information that I'm saying. It's just my opinion, and opinion are subjective. Alright, now let's proceed. Now regarding about the question says, what if the wealth was redistributed through creativity? It means that what if the wealth would kind of like assembly distributed through a person who kind of like create things. If you not really understand, let me give you the perspective. Take the real example. Okay, yeah. I'm belong to the India. I'm not really sure about the system in the US or any kind of like a part of the Europe, but I'm trying to tell you the system in India. Okay, yeah. In India, let's just say there is a kind of like a teacher, a math teacher. Okay, yeah. She kind of like found out a particular formula or particular kind of like a methodology to kind of like explain the integration very simply, as simple as possible, is it? Okay, yeah. She kind of like found this particular idea and things like that. Okay, yeah. Now this idea, this explanation is really good and students really love it. They are kind of like a love the way it's love, like basically that they the when that kind of like a only mathematics teacher kind of like explain this thing by this methodology, the entire integration and derivatives are kind of like a feel very common, like a very easy. Okay, by the way, integration and derivative, these are kind of like a simply numericals in the mathematics. Okay, these are chapters, by the way, it's very hard. Okay, yeah. Now basically what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that key, because of she kind of like a something invented this methodology, there are so many kind of like a so many students are kind of like a wanted to learn this methodology. So many people are kind of like a went to that school and things like that. Okay, yeah. Now basically, because of she kind of like invented this methodology, the school are actually getting more and more admission. The school are actually getting more and more admission, but teacher are not getting that much kind of like a salary. Like that teacher is kind of like getting the basic salary that she's getting, that's it. Most of the kind of like a profit that actually get by the kind of like a somebody the that particular school owner or things like that, because that school owner is actually getting the scholarship. Okay, yeah. But they didn't really know that scholarship, they didn't know the admission actually getting is because of the kind of like the lecturer who kind of like invented this methodology to kind of like something learn mathematics in very simple way. This is what kind of like something system is it. Basically is this thing, the people who actually create, they are kind of like simply getting very less paid as compared to the people who actually own them. They are actually getting more paid. Like example, movies, Bollywood movies. actor are kind of like a putting a lot of creativity while kind of like a acting and things and that, but most of the revenue share are kind of like a went towards the producer. It's not really that ki kind of like somebody the producer, like basically producer is also kind of like responsible for kind of like a growth of the movies and things and that and that, and actor is also really responsible for that too. But what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that producer takes kind of like somebody so much amount of profit in the movie business and things like that. But I'm not gonna argue with this thing, because in the end kind of like a producer are kind of like a gambling regarding about the talent and things like that. Okay, and basically he was kind of like spending his money to kind of like somebody paid those peoples and things and that to make this movie and stuff like that. So probably he kind of like took the risk, so that's why he kind of like earning that much amount of money. So I shouldn't supposed to blame the producer, because yeah, producer are kind of like a somewhat something risk taker, and they are kind of like they are really a perfect people who kind of like need to be more amount of money and things like that. Actor, yes, actor are kind of like showing their creativity and things like that, but still they are also kind of like getting that much amount of money that they kind of like deserve and things like that. It's not really that the producer are not actually paying them money or stuff like that. Okay, but still is this thing, it's not actually happen in kind of like a bigger scale, but it actually happen in kind of like a lower scale. Okay, yeah, kind of like an employee who kind of like a somebody really good doing something really work, then the company who's kind of like is only gaining that much amount of more and more profit. Okay, and things like that. So the question is that what if we would kind of like simply distributed the wealth, distributed the wealth to the people who kind of like create things and stuff like that, instead of kind of like simply landowner, or kind of like simply the kind of like owner of something or things like that. So can we able to do this thing? Can we able to kind of like something that distribute the wealth to the creator and things like that? Well, let me give you perspective. Okay, yeah. I am not a kind of like a bias. I also think that the people who are kind of like doing the creativity, they also kind of like gain the money and things like that. Okay. But throughout the life, I realized something very differently. Okay. And what is that? Uh, Money means how much money? Okay. Yeah. Let me tell you something. Okay. Yeah. You don't really have money to eat food twice in a day. Obviously, you need money. Okay. Yeah, you have some certain amount of money that you could kind of like simply settle your life as better as you can. Okay, yeah, you need some certain amount of money. Then do you really require a kind of like a so much amount of money that you can't even consume through rest of the lifetime? Obviously not. Okay, obviously not. Example. Okay, yeah, example. um who is actually kind of like a getting money, who is kind of like earning money more today? Okay, yeah, the people who create things, or the people who took the risk? The people who took the risk, they are actually kind of like getting more and more money, because they deserve that thing. Okay, because risk is a kind of like such a factor that comes with kind of like some intuition and things and that. Creativity, that kind of like comes to you, okay, comes from you and things like that. But the risk is like a very less people kind of like do this thing. If you not really understand, let me give you the perspective. Let me understand what is it I'm trying to tell you. Okay, take the Elon Musk. Okay, now Elon Musk started the company called SpaceX. Okay, now SpaceX is a company who kind of like somebody focus on reusable rocket. That rocket can kind of like use again and again. Okay, now this is a very new idea. At that time, there is no rocket are actually available who can kind of like reuse again. Okay, so the every people who are kind of like a considered as an expert in aerodynamics, or kind of like somebody aeronautics, or kind of like airfield or anything, everyone says that reusable rocket is not a good thing, is not a kind of like somebody vital solution, is not a thing. Everyone kind of like a criticize Elon Musk. No one is kind of like a believe in him that it could be possible. And another thing is that the Elon Musk is kind of like a gaining failure and failure and again and again and failure again. Okay, but did he stop? No, he did not stop, and he make the rocket that can reusable, that can kind of like use again and again. Because of this thing, kind of like a simply the sending someone, or kind of like a sending something to the space, the cost really required to send something in the space is kind of like a became less. and which kind of like a really good for the society and things like that. What I'm trying to tell you is this thing: Elon Musk took the risk. He took the risk in 2001, that 2001 or 2003 when he launched the SpaceX. He took the risk even if everyone says it's not gonna possible, but still he did that. He did that. He kind of like a somebody tried to figure it out and try to fix it, and he made the reusable rocket. And that's what he was actually earning that much amount of money today. Okay, yeah. Risk is very much essential thing, and no one, very very less people are kind of like a somebody do the risk. And this is what we are. Okay, this is what kind of like because most of the time risk is not worth it. Okay, really not worth it. Like basically is this thing: if you think that this stock market will be kind of like a somebody will go up and things like that, so you will kind of like a risk it and kind of like a invest entire money, would you do that thing? Some people do, but almost like a 99.9% people will not gonna do this thing. Okay, yeah. And this is what kind of like a things, very less people are trying to do a risk. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing: in the world that we are living today, the people who took the risk, they are actually earning more. Okay, yeah. Now, like, then what if the creativity is somewhat something really essential, na? Like, you should supposed to be paid the people who kind of like create things. And yeah, society pays money to the people who kind of like create things too. And also society also respect to the people who kind of like create things too. But also is this thing, they are not earning that much amount of money. Okay, like kind of like Elon Musk kind of like some level. No, they are kind of like earning money a kind of like a some significant way, that they would supposed to be kind of like a somebody spend their entire life as much as properly luxuries it could be possible in. Yeah, it's not really that much kind of like Elon Musk, but kind of like a somebody is this thing, they are kind of like earning a significant amount of money that kind of like sustain the life is as much as better it possible. Okay, so yeah, this is what I'm trying to tell you. Okay, so basically so what is actually your thing? Like basically you think that the creative people shouldn't supposed to be gain more amount of money. Well, let me give you perspective. Okay, a creator or kind of like a person who create things, who are those people? A musician or comedian, or kind of like a somebody script writer, or kind of like any person who kind of like create things, we call them as a creator. Okay, understand? Okay, now basically is this thing: how many people are available in this world? Let's just try to take the assumption. Okay, in 100 out of, you're gonna find almost like maybe 60 people who are kind of like a create something. 60 people, 100 out of 60 people. I'm trying to tell you from today's point of perspective. I'm not really sure about the backend and things like that, but 100 out of 60 people are trying to create something. Okay, yeah. I'm taking 100 people are random people. Okay, yeah. And kind of like ask them what you do and things like that. Some people are kind of like say I'm kind of like doing a job or things or that and that. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing, do you think that those are people are kind of like doing their job? So probably they are not actually creating things, but dude, they are creating things. Okay, yeah. Some people are kind of like doing a job in kind of like app development or kind of like things or that. Because in the society that we are living today in 2025, okay, yeah, it's kind of like such a thing that everyone are kind of like create something. Okay, somewhat something create a kind of like things, or kind of like create something better way to do this thing, or something like that. Okay, 100 out of 60. Okay, if you still not believing me, just try to understand what kind of like a job that you do. Let's just say you are kind of like a CAD modeler, computer aided design modeler. You are kind of like doing a job as a kind of like designing and things like that. So are you kind of like creating things, or are you kind of like somebody doing your job? You are creating things now. You are kind of like designing the model, that kind of like something understanding, does it kind of like handle the pressure or things or that and that, so that when it kind of like somebody make in real life, it could kind of like sustain that pressure and things like that. So basically in this thing, you are kind of like creating things today. Okay, that kind of like somebody happened, that kind of like somebody born in real life afterwards. Okay, yeah. So this is what it is. Let's just say you are kind of like a coder, you are kind of like a simply app development, you are kind of like a coder. So what kind of like you are creating? Obviously, from your point of perspective, you are not creating anything. You are just kind of like simply, let's just say that ki I'm just kind of like simply doing my job and things like that. But actually, you are kind of like creating things. You are kind of like simply fixing the bugs and things like that to try to make the app kind of like simply feel really good. It kind of like a work really well and things like that. Okay, yeah. So is it creativity? Is it creativity, dude? But most of people doesn't really know, because most of people consider that a creativity means like create something, like basically a song or basically a video, YouTube video, or kind of like a somebody is this thing that ki kind of like a some particular application, things like that. And people actually assume that ki creativity means like that only people at the top who kind of like create things and that's it. That is not. That is not. Okay, definitely not. Okay, yeah. Everyone does creativity. It's not really that no one does creativity. If you still not really understand, I'm gonna kind of like give you another example. Okay, another example. Okay, let's just say you are the driver, and is your job is kind of like a let the passenger kind of like a one place to another place. So is your job is a creativity? No, my job is not creativity. I'm kind of like a driving the bus. How is my job is creativity? Right? It's not my kind of like a something. It's not my kind of like a somebody. It's not my it's not my job is not creativity. How am I supposed to be? I'm kind of like doing just a typical work doing every single day, and it's not a creativity. Okay, do you agree? Yeah, I'm completely agree that driving a job is not a creative job. All right. Okay. So because of you are a driver and you are kind of like a driving for almost like a 5 year. Okay, yeah. Now basically you are driving for 5 year, you actually know how to kind of like a turn the entire bus. You actually know how much space it really required to kind of like a take the U-turn of the bus. You actually know how much kind of like a you put the acceleration to the pedal that kind of like a simply get throttle and things like that. You know how the fuel consumption, you know everything. You know more about driving. It's not kind of like a typical that you just kind of like a driving. When you are kind of like a spending so much time on doing things, you kind of like a learn more regarding about that skills. Okay, yeah. And when you learn more about that skills, it's kind of like a something at some time it doesn't really feel a creativity, because you are not creating anything, and because it's not kind of like a seeing as a creative and things like that. But it kind of like a represent through your work. Because let's just say if you are kind of like a driving for 5 year, the next 5 year the way that you drive is kind of like a so much like a better that you can drive in anywhere. Like basically you just understand regarding about bus and how do you supposed to drive. Your muscle memory is kind of like a simply gaining that much information that you just understand everything regarding about driving the bus. You just understand that ki how many fuel it required. You just understand is this space is kind of like a had enough to kind of like a take the U-turn or not, or things like that. Those are kind of like information that you have inside of your mind. It's kind of like comes from your kind of like a driving for almost like a years and years and after. Okay, obviously it's not kind of like a showing as a kind of like a something is this thing that I kind of like a create something or things like that. But it's somehow something supports to the kind of like a society to kind of like a build the better place and things like that. Okay, obviously the driver is not a kind of like a somebody a creator or things like that. Definitely not. Okay, yeah. But it kind of like somebody adds some values and things like that. Obviously, is this thing I mentioned that 60% are the creator, 40% are not, and driver are also one of those 40% too. But 60% are. Like basically there are something way to kind of like create something. Like let's just say my mother is not chef. My mother is not kind of like a somebody is this thing that she kind of like a went to the hotel management and kind of like a study about the kind of like a somebody spices and things like that. But she makes really good food, and she just kind of like doing this for rest of the time. And kind of like the way that she make the puran puri, I doubt that no one makes the puran puri like that. Obviously I never let test kind of like someone mother make it, but still is this thing that my mother makes a really good amount of food, really good taste food. And that is kind of like somewhat something creative, because she was kind of like doing this job for almost like an entire lifetime, and she became so much expert that she understand the spices and she understand the everything, that how much you put things that kind of like somebody taste good and things and that. It comes from the experience. It comes from the kind of like somebody the things that you do every single day. So does it call kind of like a creativity? Obviously she's not earning that much amount of money and things like that, but the way that she making food is really good, really tasty and things like that. So in this particular context, your mother is a creator, na? Probably. Yeah, this is what it is. Dude, a creativity or creator is not of a particular person that you kind of like represent, a YouTube creator or a music creator or things or that and that. Every person is kind of like a create something. Look at the world around you. Who do you think that who creates that world? Like basically is this thing that the construction people, like are those creator people, like they are kind of like a creating this world, they are kind of like a building this, like they are kind of like a building the building, they are kind of like a building this kind of like a beautiful house and things and that and that. Are they doing a job or are they kind of like creating something new? They are creating things. It's not really that they are not creating things and that and that. So basically what I'm saying is that almost like a 40% of the people are kind of like a creator in something. Then why not people are kind of like if the people are kind of like creating things, then why not they are kind of like somebody rich? That's the biggest problem. The biggest problem is that there are almost like let's just say 40 or 50% of the people who are kind of like create things, but the people who actually earn money are such a creator who kind of like believe in creativity, and he could kind of like do the risk for his craftsmanship and kind of like a proof that he could do this thing. Example, let's just say that I am a construction worker. Okay, yeah, and I'm kind of like earning, let's just say $10 per day. Okay, $10 per day, and I'm kind of like creating very beautiful building and things and that and that. Okay, yeah, probably is this thing I'm not earning that much amount of money, and I'm kind of like simply making the buildings and stuff like that. I decided that no, I should supposed to be take charge. So what I do next day, I kind of like left the job and kind of like simply create my own construction company. Okay, yeah, I kind of like talk to the kind of like somebody the materialistic people that I need this kind of like a soil or cement or things or that and that. Okay, yeah, for this particular purpose you need money, and for this particular money you need a risk, because like will it be kind of like a possible or not, you will get the client or not or things and that. You will take the risk. After you take the risk, you kind of like simply get the client and you make the building. And when you make that particular building, that building owner kind of like gives you money, and then you are kind of like simply gaining so much amount of money. What I'm trying to tell you is this thing, that creator are not earning money until and unless they are kind of like take the risk for their craftsmanship. They kind of like believe that they could do this thing, and then and after they could kind of like simply earning so much amount of money. And that's why kind of like wealth distribution to the people who kind of like not only the create things, but as also take the risk with it, and those people are actually earn so much amount of money. Don't really assume that there are kind of like somebody very less creator. There are so many people who are creator. Take your mother, she is also really creator too. Okay, yeah, but my mother really makes a really good food, but she didn't really take a kind of like a risk to kind of like somebody show her talent to the kind of like somebody community where kind of like people are kind of like showing that what they are kind of like making and stuff like that. She always kind of like hassle and things. She always bitly scared and things like that, because no one have a kind of like somebody um, uh, intuition to take a risk and kind of like somebody show them that what kind of like a talent that they have. So obviously is this thing, it's really essential that not only you just need a creativity, but you need a kind of like somebody risk or believe that you could do this thing and you could do something much better and things like that. And that is very hard stuff. That is very hard stuff. Risk is not kind of like simply just a common word that you just kind of like use it and things like that. It's a very you just have to understand the gravity behind it, because you're gonna face lot of criticism, lot of failure and things and that, but still after that you could kind of like still believe in yourself that you could do this thing. You kind of like believe your patience and creativity and passions and things, and you could do this thing. You can do this thing and you can earn so much amount of money. Okay, yeah, so basically is this thing, the question is that what if we could kind of like redistribute the kind of like somebody creativity, redistribute the wealth to the creative person? No, it's not. We cannot able to do this thing. Okay, yeah, because the money management is comes very different thing. Okay, and obviously is this thing, the society that we are living is kind of like a good enough. Okay, yeah, the societies are kind of like paying to the people, such a people who are kind of like willing to take a risk with his passion, with his creativity, then that particular person earns so much amount of money. And there are so many creators actually exist. There are so many people are kind of like create something. There is no, like they are abundant. Okay, they are also abundant in the number. It's not like that. Alright, so this is just my opinion regarding about the wealth distributing through creativity. Okay, yeah. Alright, this is it, and thank you.